Hello, it's George Anderson here from IntelligentRunning.com, and today we are talking stitches again. I shot a video last week, I think it was, about ways you can combat a stitch when they strike. But today I'm going to be looking at one of the main reasons why we get a stitch and how we can prevent it from happening in the first place. You know what it's like when you're running along and you get that annoying digging, sharp feeling of the stitch coming into your ribs there. Well, one of the reasons why we feel it in this region here is because this is where your major respiratory muscle, the diaphragm, sits. Now the thing about the diaphragm is it's a kind of conical shaped muscle that sits like this, and then when you breathe in, normally what should happen is this muscle contracts, does that, and that opens up your rib cage, opens up the space that your lungs sit in, and that creates a vacuum and draws air in through your mouth and nose. So that's how we should breathe. Now normally what happens is through the day we spend quite a lot of time, or many of us do, we're sitting down and we're hunched over like this, and there's very little space for this diaphragm to do its job and to contract. So what happens is, rather than that major primary respiratory muscle doing what it's supposed to do, what happens is we get these accessory respiratory muscles kicking in instead. So we've got muscles that expand the rib cage and muscles that lift the rib cage, and that kind of does the same job. It allows us to breathe at a low level. We're not going to get as much air into our lungs, but we should get just about enough to help us tap, tap, tap away at the laptop. But then what happens is when we go and run, instead of using the diaphragm as the primary respiratory muscle to get as much air in as we need to, what happens excuse me, is we have to call on that muscle because we're running and we need to get more air in, but because it's not used to working, all of a sudden we're placing a huge demand on a muscle that is otherwise detrained. So what happens if you don't train your legs and then you suddenly go and do a load of squats or go and do some sprints? Your legs are muscles and they're going to get tired and you're going to get a buildup of lactic acid. Well, that buildup of lactic acid occurs in the diaphragm just as it does in any other muscle, and that is often what we feel as a stitch. So when you go running, if you're relying, normally day to day you're relying on these accessory respiratory muscles, and then you place this huge demand on the diaphragm as well, then that's going to start causing problems. So one way of combating this is to learn how to breathe properly. That kind of sounds a little bit weird, but if you ever watch a baby, I've got 3 young children, and I love watching my kids sleep, and it's so natural watching their tummies rise and fall as they breathe in and breathe out. So what should be happening is, as if I turn to the side, you'll see, if I put my hands on my tummy, when I breathe in, you should see my tummy push out as my diaphragm pushes down. And that pushes all the visceral organs, it creates this pressure in this area here and it pushes the tummy out. That happens for about 2/3 of the breath, and the final third comes from this lifting and expanding of the rib cage with these accessory muscles. So let me show you that again. Deep breath in. You see the 2/3 of the breath, the tummy goes out, and the final third, the rib cage. I'm feeling a little bit lightheaded now. Okay, back on it. So that's how we should be breathing. We should be breathing from the belly. So what I want you to do is to, first of all, just get a feel for how you naturally breathe. And if you put your hand on your chest and the other hand on your tummy, and you take a couple of deep breaths and you feel that this happens, and your tummy actually goes in as you breathe in, that's a pretty good sign that this diaphragm muscle here isn't doing what it should be doing. So how can we change that? How can we train this muscle to be more active? Well, the first thing is to, first of all, be more aware of it. So you've watched this video, you should now be aware that we should be breathing from the belly. Step 1 complete. The next thing is to try and change it if that isn't the case. And there's 2 ways we can do that. First way is the easiest way to do it practically, but not necessarily technically. I'll explain that in a second. If you put your hand on your chest and your hand on your tummy, from a standing position, and then just try to breathe with your tummy coming out first and then your rib cage lifting, that is going to start retraining your systems, retraining the neural pathways to your respiratory muscles. And you have to kind of really concentrate on that. And it's quite hard to do. You find that actually it is hard to fill your tummy when you breathe in, then you might find it easier technically to do it from a lying position. So you literally lie down flat on your back, hand on your chest, hand on your tummy, and just spend a few minutes just breathing and getting to feel how these breaths are being formed in your body. So which muscles are working to draw the air into your body. Now, it is a reflex action, you've got to do it all the time, but we can take control and change the muscles that we use for the breathing mechanism. Now, if you can start doing this and you can start training, effectively training and using the diaphragm throughout the day, then when it comes time to go running and to go training and you're placing this increased demand on the respiratory system, there's much less of a chance of you fatiguing this muscle so early and getting that lactic acid building up that's one of the potential causes of getting a stitch. Now, of course, there are other reasons, and many people say they find that they get a stitch depending on when they've drunk or eaten last prior to going for a run. Too soon or too far away from the run can cause problems too. But that's something you just need to play around with. And often what happens there is it's just as the body diverts blood away from the digestive system into the working muscles of the body, and that can create a different kind of stitch. But one thing you can certainly do is to change the way you breathe. It's going to have a lot of other benefits as well. Getting more oxygen into the body, change the way you breathe, improve, go back to breathing the way you did when you were a baby, and that is going to hopefully have an impact on your running as well. I'm George Anderson from IntelligentRunning.com, and I'll see you again soon.